Tamir Rice was shot dead in 2 seconds in Ohio. Cops pulled up. They didn't ask him any questions. They assumed his toy gun was a real gun, and without any notice at all, shot him dead. How much notice can you give in 2 seconds? Now, I'm going to show you the video in a second, but first, I have news on it. That's why we're bringing this up. A grand jury in Ohio has decided not to press any charges against the 2 officers involved, Frank Garmbach or Timothy Lohman, who fatally shot Rice in the video you're about to see. So there's Tamir Rice. He's a 12-year-old at a park. The cops pull straight up to him. They're not on the street. They're not inquiring. They get out of the car, shoot him dead. 2 seconds. Now, they claim, well, I couldn't tell, so better safe than sorry. Just murder the 12-year-old and figure things out later. Ask questions later. Black. Now, they don't say that. No, there was a real danger. Oh, my God, I didn't know. It looked like something that was a gun. And the 911 operator heard that it was a toy gun but didn't relay that to me. So I assumed I should shoot that black person dead just in case he might ever harm me. Now, wait a minute. If I was worried about being harmed, why didn't I pull up on the street, maybe take out my gun because I thought it was a real gun, and say, hey, hands up, freeze, you're under arrest. Throw the gun down. Are you a kid? What is that? What are you holding? Maybe I wait for backup. No, I drive right up to him and shoot him dead. I got him, right? And what happened? Free to go. Why? In this case, the prosecutors so clearly threw the grand jury investigation, they almost brag about it. Now, again, I was a prosecutor very briefly for 2 summers as an intern when I was in law school. But one thing I knew as a prosecutor, even working there briefly, was that the old saying, you can indict a ham sandwich if you want. Meaning you can indict anything. Defense cannot show up to grand jury investigations. The prosecutor has complete discretion. But these prosecutors all across the country, and definitely in this specific case, don't want to indict the cops. They're buddies with the cops. They work with the cops all the time. They love the cops. They want the cops to go scot-free. They're going to work with them tomorrow. Of course they're on the cops' side. So they do the exact opposite. Just like in Ferguson, they present witnesses on behalf of the cops, not against the cops, in a grand jury proceeding. That's, except for the case of cops, unheard of. Unheard of. If a citizen had shot a cop, you think a prosecutor is going to go to grand jury and be like, now I can present any evidence I like, but I'm going to show you why you shouldn't convict this cop killer. You think they might do that at a grand jury? They're not going to do that at a grand jury hearing. If it's a cop who got shot, anybody else who got shot, if a cop does a shooting of a black person, hey, let's go. Wipe it under the rug. Who cares? Now let me give you details. The Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office released investigations. This is before they go to the grand jury. Released investigations concluding the shooting was justified. The prosecutor's office, before going to prosecute, says shooting's definitely justified. Oh, thank you for not being biased. That's really appreciated. Those are not the defense. That's the prosecution. Okay, McKinley, who is the prosecutor here in Ohio, in Cuyahoga County, explained that he recommended no charges, too, after reviewing the case, calling it a perfect storm of human error that showed no criminal conduct by the police. Where the hell's the justice, man? Well, then why are you pretending to be the prosecutor? If you say, I'm positive the cops aren't guilty, and I'm going to try to prove that to a grand jury instead of doing my job, well, then recuse yourself. Give it over to some other independent authority. You can't just say, I declare the cops to be innocent, and then I will pretend to try them to see if a grand jury will indict them. You see, we're all in on it. It's so funny when we kill 12-year-olds and then brag about how we're going to get away with it. McKinley also said it would have been, quote, unreasonable to make an officer wait to see if a gun that someone was drawing from their pocket was real or a toy. So he thinks the actions of the cops are perfectly reasonable. In fact, if you'd asked him to do anything else, it would have been unreasonable. So now you know, black citizens of Ohio, but honestly, all citizens of Ohio, all 12-year-olds of Ohio, all parents in Ohio, you should know, cops find it perfectly reasonable to pull up to your 12-year-old and shoot him dead in 2 seconds flat. They don't think it's reasonable to ask questions. They don't think it's reasonable to park, I don't know, 100 feet away, 20 feet away, 10 feet away. No, that's not reasonable. That would be unreasonable to ask them to do that. You're on notice now. They can shoot your kids dead, and there's not a goddamn thing you're going to do about it, because the prosecutor's going to come in and go, here, I am throwing the case. I will not do my job. I will do the opposite and make sure there is no justice. And you're on notice in Ohio. Any of your kids can get killed in 2 seconds flat, no questions asked, and the authorities will find it eminently reasonable. You saw that video? You thought that was reasonable? All these guys, the cops, the prosecutors, all in that area. Go, oh, no, yeah. Anybody who disagrees, the cops threatened athletes in Cleveland who disagreed that perhaps they wouldn't get protection. Well, if this is the kind of protection you're talking about, I don't want it. I don't want any part of it. Now, you can understand why the family is upset. More evidence that they presented that the prosecutors threw the case is they came out and put witnesses on the stand that exonerated what the cops did. Again, that is the exact opposite of the purpose of a grand jury proceeding. Do you want to try? You know, the grand jury, you don't convict a person. It's just a proceeding to see if he's going to go to trial so you can see all the evidence. That's where the defense comes in and says, hey, no, you shouldn't convict him. You need reasonable doubt, and we have a real case, and we find out what happened. The grand jury is, hey, do you have anything to bring this guy to trial? You can indict, like I said, almost anything or anybody in the country if you want to. The prosecutor has full discretion. In his discretion, instead of indicting him, he says, oh, here's a wonderful witness who says the cops had to do it. It was so reasonable. Now, if you're in the jury, what are you going to think? The prosecutor's telling me not to indict. He's telling me over and over again not to do it. Here are more evidence. The family said, first of all, they accused the prosecutor of, quote, abusing and manipulating the grand jury process to orchestrate a vote against indictment. And by the way, you understand why they go to a grand jury? So they can say, I didn't say not to indict. I didn't make that decision. I asked the grand jury, and the grand jury said I shouldn't. That's a jury of his peers. They said I shouldn't indict. Oh, well, I threw the case. Yeah, very clever, very clever. So, again, attorney for the family of Tamir Rice says, Prosecutor McGinty allowed the police officers to take the oath and read prepared statements to the grand jury without answering any questions on cross-examination, even though it is black-letter law that taking the stand waives the Fifth Amendment right to be silent. The prosecutor did not seek a court order compelling the officers to answer questions or holding the officers in contempt if they continued to refuse. The way Prosecutor McGinty has mishandled the grand jury process has compounded the grief of this family. The idea that a prosecutor would allow someone who's accused of weighty matters here, and we're talking about homicide, that's the accusation. That's what we're seeing if we're going to have a trial over. The idea that he would allow the defendant to get up and say anything they want and not cross-examine them. Preposterous. They would never, ever, ever do that for anyone who wasn't a cop. But the cops are above the law, apparently, certainly in Cuyahoga County, certainly in Ohio. Watch out. If you live in Ohio, you're just driving through Ohio. Watch out. It's open season on you and your kids, and the prosecutors aren't going to do a damn thing about it. At what point would it have been reasonable to indict? If they shot Tamir Rice within 1 second? They shot him in 2 seconds. At what point do you say, hey, perhaps they acted unreasonably? Maybe it's not murder one, but maybe it's negligent homicide. Maybe, just maybe, they shouldn't have killed a kid in 2 seconds flat. You think you would have had a different conclusion if it was 1 second? No. There is no amount of time where apparently in Ohio, at least in this county, you can't shoot a 12-year-old and get away with it. They will find your actions reasonable almost no matter what. I don't know. They're not shooting a lot of 12-year-old whites, and I hope to God they don't. But you think they won't? They're above the law. They can shoot anybody they like. When they came for the blacks, what did you do? When they came for the Mexicans, what did you do? And the mentally disabled get shot more than anybody else in this country. When they came for them, the cops shot them. because, it's a hassle to arrest this guy. Let's just murder him and move on with our lives. What did you do? So when they come for you and they come for your family, don't be surprised, because if you live in this area, you sanctioned it. You allow this prosecutor to destroy the law, destroy justice, and say, well, I mean, I don't know, I guess he was under some sort of threat. So the next time somebody else is killed in 2 seconds, and it might be someone you know or part of your family, don't complain. You thought it was great when it happened to other people. If you don't think it's great, then do something about it. Should McGinty be fired? At a minimum. At a minimum. What kind of negligence is this on the actions of a so-called prosecutor? Of course he should be fired. Is there going to be any real justice? The only question is if federal prosecutors can do anything about this. But once it goes federal, it is much, much harder to prove, and they know it. That's why they snicker in their corners about getting away with it. Oh, they had to do it. It was so reasonable to kill that kid in 2 seconds. Reasonable my ass. They say black people in this country are angry. They're not nearly angry enough. Nobody should ever take the law into their own hands. You shouldn't become the monsters you fight against. Unfortunately, in this case, the cops, the prosecutors are those monsters. Young Turks.